Hello, this is Dr. Roger Smith. I am what I like to refer to myself as I'm a country doctor. Live in Louisiana, and I'm an internal medicine physician that practices in a small town in rural Louisiana, and been here for most of my life. And we have my wife and I have raised 4 children to adulthood, and we home educated from kindergarten all the way through to college. And all of our children are grown and gone and started their own lives, careers, families, and I'd like to as I look back, share some of the things that what I would capsulize as saying what or answering the question really of what is the dad's place in the homeschool? Because so much of the activity seems to be surrounding what mom does with the children, and oftentimes dads feel left out of place or not really knowing what their role is, and so it often feels like the title of this, "Follow Me, I'm Right Behind You," and that as a kind of a comical title in the sense that we feel like one, we're supposed to be leading in the home, and the home is kind of running ahead of us, and often that is what our experience is, and I want to underscore what your role, Dad, is in the home, specifically in the home school. But a lot of this applies even to people who are not home educating, and so there's a very important role that dads play, and so as we go through it, hopefully it will give you some insights, some ideas of things that you can do differently. And so let's, as we go through this, then maybe it will be helpful to you. So here we go. A lot of the resources that I've used, well, they come from a lifelong learning, and so these are some of the books that I refer to often. And you can see that it's kind of heavily weighted toward John Maxwell, who teaches in leadership, and usually most of his conferences and his writings are applied in the business world, but they're really just great leadership ideas. And the role of the dad in the home is a leadership position, and understanding leadership. Any opportunity you can grow in understanding leadership will help you be more effective as a dad. So there's also the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Stephen Covey books, the Scripture. There are lots of others, and I may mention some others as we go along here. But those are some of the resources that I draw from. Just know that leadership is influence. And learning to become more influential is going to make you a better leader. So growing in understanding influence, that leadership is influence, and it's not about a position. Quite often we think of being the leader as that you demand someone to follow you, but really true leadership is about influence. It has very little to do with a position. And if you find yourself saying, "Hey, listen, I'm the parent here," well, or "I'm the leader here," well, if you're having to announce the fact that you are something, you're really saying, "I am trying to lead from a position and not from influence." And so we must continually work on our mindset, shifting back to influence and working on how can we have a greater influence. And that's my challenge for you today, is to try to help give you some tips and ideas about increasing your influence. I want to underscore the fact that you have more influence than you think. And your words mean a lot to your children. They mean a lot to your spouse. The things that you do, the things that you value, have great influence on the home, even if it doesn't feel like it. I love the song, it's a country song titled "I'm Already There." And the storyline in the song is that the dad is working away from the home, and he calls back to speak to his wife, and before he knows it, the children are on the phone and asking the question, when are you coming home, Dad? And he says the first thing that comes to his mind, I'm already there. I'm the sunshine in your hair. I'm the shadow on the ground. And it just, the whole song speaks to the influence of the Father, even in his absence. So who you are influences your home, and that is so important. So as you grow, your influence grows. And that's what we're talking about today, is the influence that you can have. Now, here's an interesting question for you. Are you more like a thermostat or more like a thermometer? Thermometer just says it's hot in here. It announces what the temperature is, whereas the thermostat does something to change the environment. And we as dads must be proactive and making a difference in what our home environment is like. And if it's too hot, not just announcing, hey, y'all need to calm down, cool off. But do some things that actively change the emotional temperature of the home, or the educational pursuit temperature of the home, or what it is where you want different. Where you find a point of aggravation, that's a call to action, and you can make a difference. So be not just the thermometer, but be a thermostat that makes a difference in what your home environment is like, what your family relationships are like. And so there are things that you can do. So I like to use these 4 C's to describe what leadership, some characteristics of leadership that makes a difference. And the first C is care. And John Maxwell in one of his books says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And their sense that we genuinely care. We're not just aggravated, but we care about them as people, and we care about their success. We care about what happens, and we're not nonchalant about it, but that there is a genuine caring. So lead with care. Now, there's also, we must have character that backs it up, and that we reproduce who we are, not what we want. So we don't ideal and say we want our children to be like this, or we want our home to be like this, and it doesn't just happen because it's an idea. We reproduce who we are, and so again, we must be growing. So what you do when no one is watching is what someone says character is, but it is also what you think and what you desire. So those are things that are kind of the intangibles. This is really kind of the motive for our activity, is the character that we possess. We must lead with confidence. So it's been said that confidence is saying, I believe I can. But confidence is, I actually can do it. And are you growing in your skills, whether it's related to your work or whether it's related to your hobbies, other areas that you need to grow? You have something that happens in your home and you need to respond to it. Do you learn about it? Do your children see you growing and learning? And do you share what you've learned whenever you learn a new way to repair something that's better? Or you learn about a new tool to use in your work, whether it's a software or whether it's physical tools that you use. Do you share that with your children and let them see that you're constantly growing in your competence, your ability to actually do something and not just talk about it and think about it? And so we also need to lead with consistency. It's not what we do on an occasion that makes a difference, but it's what we do daily. Growth is daily, not in a day. We don't suddenly become consistent. Consistency is the thing that we do over and over and over. And so we must lead with care, character, competence, and consistency. And so we'll take each one of these, and I'm going to give you some specifics of each one of these that may kind of put some skin on it, more than just saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, what can we do to help them to know how much we care? Well, let's start with your spouse. I know this talks about the dad's role in the home, but first, this is the dad's role in the marriage. And so, leading your spouse, um, here's three words: affection, appreciation, and affirmation. You know, she needs all three of those things from you. She needs your affection, she needs your tenderness, and your genuine interest and care. And hey, you married the lady, and so at one point you were affectionate toward her. We need to rekindle that. If it's grown kind of cold and just simply a pragmatic or functional relationship, plan some time to show her affection, and not in a way that you're trying to get something back. Just simply showing her affection because she's important to you. Appreciation, the things that they do, the struggles that they have, a genuine, I appreciate what you're doing. I value what you're doing. I value you as a person. Appreciate your spouse. And then affirm the things that they do well. And even the things that they're not doing well, but they're trying their best. They're doing hard. We affirm their effort, their desire. And so affection, appreciation, and affirmation. Invest in the relationship with your spouse. And you know, this picture shows them having some time alone together, and you do have to have some time alone in order to really invest in the relationship. You can certainly, there's times as a family that builds the relationship, but seek for an opportunity to even just have an hour with your spouse where you focus on her. And it may be just going to the store together. Maybe that's all you can manage. But if you can have an afternoon to go do something, and really being together is more important than doing something. So maybe it's sitting by a lake or a pond or a stream. Water seems to somehow restore us. Or finding some quiet place where you can connect. And seek to understand what is going on inside her. So it says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's one of the habits of highly effective people. Seek to understand her and her thoughts, her concerns, her fears, and just ask a question and listen. That's a thought. Pause long enough to listen. Say, hey, tell me, how's your week been, and what's been the highs and lows? We call it thorns and roses. Every rose has thorns. Not every thorn has a rose, but if we find the roses in our life and we talk about them, but we say, well, what was the downside of that, or what was hard for you in that, and really try to understand what's going on inside your spouse. We did that when we were dating. We need to do that now. So seek to invest in your relationship with your spouse. Appreciate her strengths. This picture shows a lot of different qualities or strengths or different things that this person may have. Your wife's strengths. We tend to focus on weaknesses. It just seems that way, that the world functions in identifying people's weaknesses where they've made a mess of things or said the wrong word, and we highlight those. But in our relationship, we need to make a list of our wife's strengths. What does she do well? What is she good at? And have a reminder of sorts for us, so that we can say, you're really good at organizing, or you are really attentive to the emotional needs of our children, and I appreciate that. And making a list of some things that you say, my wife does this well. And a list also may be those things that she's growing in, that you see tangible improvements in. And we need to appreciate those things and identify those things, rather than saying, you spent too much on this, or identifying a weakness or a flaw or a mistake. Or so we as the leader need to identify and appreciate our spouse's strengths. So there are lots of tools to help us to identify what are some strengths and give us some language for it. Most of the language is negative. Like we have lots of words like bossy instead of using a leader, or just an action taker, someone who is proactive. We tend to say they're bossy, and that's negative. But the Strengths Finder book, it's in the top left on this, gives some positive language to a lot of those qualities that really are positives, and we tend to have a negative tone for them. So there's the Strengths Finder helps us to identify. There's Briggs Myers has a system for helping you identify what type of person your wife is, so that you can understand what makes her tick. The 5 love languages that helps to understand how they communicate and receive messages of love. There's the clock, their biologic clock. Is she a morning person? Is she a night person? Does she does she need more sleep than you or less sleep than you? So there are lots of different ways we can analyze and seek to understand our spouse. So no single tool has all the answers. So the more we find tools of understanding personality, strengths, ways of functioning, even health, understanding the health of our spouse is so important. So commit yourself to adding value to your spouse's strengths. Now, what I really mean by this is where your wife has a strength, that is an area that she can grow the most. So find an opportunity, whether it's a conference, whether it's some type of group or support group that helps them grow in a certain area. Commit to making that opportunity available to her. It may involve money, but sometimes it's not money, it's time, and it's freedom from home responsibilities. That you need to make a way for her to be a part of the quilt club, if that is really an avenue of creative outlet for her, or maybe it's a baking or book club, or maybe it's that she has a particular need to understand a new software tool or something that she's using, whether she's a blogger or she is doing some type of communication responsibility, and she needs to understand the tools that she's using. Look for opportunities for her to grow in the areas of her strength, and you'll reap the benefit if you are investing in her strengths. Add value to her strengths. Sometimes it's you making a commitment to be a part of the solution. Now, where we are see that they have a weakness in their areas of responsibility, sometimes we can come along beside and be the solution. Maybe it's a friend that would be the solution, but lots of times it's us. But I say ask permission to be a part of the game plan to complement or to support weaknesses. Now, sometimes when we just jump in and say, let me take care of that, that comes across as saying, you're no good at this and I don't appreciate you trying, and it comes across negative. But where we can say, honey, I see this is really a hard thing for you. Could I help with that? Would it be okay, or do you think it'd be all right if I took over this responsibility in the family? So it's because I see that you got a lot on your plate, and this is one that's really hard for you, and you're good at those other things. So there's lots of ways to ask permission to come alongside and support and complement your spouse's weaknesses. So here's a big one. Publicly praise your spouse. It's great when we can have messages of love and appreciation and praise, and if we do those privately, that's great. What really honors your spouse more is if you praise them in front of their friends. If they are praised by their closest person to them in front of their other close associates. So you may be standing in the hall at church or at some meeting where she's visiting with friends, or friends are standing around, and you look at the friends and say, I want to tell you something that my wife did that I think was amazing. And you go about telling them just one specific thing. And it needs to be specific to her, not just say, my wife is wonderful. Now, that's great. You can start with that and say, I want to tell you something specific that she did that shows how wonderful she is. But praising your spouse in front of other people. Now, I'm not saying get on a stage and get the microphone and announce publicly in a large meeting. I'm saying in front of someone that's important to her. It may be sitting in the stands at a sporting event while you're watching your children play, and you make a comment to someone else around about something you really appreciate about your spouse. Not saying something to your spouse, but to the people that are around when she can hear what you're saying to them. Now, you listen to what other people are saying about their spouse to the people sitting around. It's not going to be praise. They're going to be talking about how stupid they are or how irresponsible. But if you want to make a difference, if you want to change the temperature in your home, you publicly praise your spouse. Now, let's start looking at some things with the children. And this is one of my favorite things, and I wish I was a lot better at this, and there were some opportunities where I said, we really did well in this area this one time, and I wish I was much more consistent in it. And I challenge you to develop a system of blessing your children, a plan. Maybe it's you can develop a routine with their bedtime, but I want to talk about some opportunities for blessing your children that have a lasting impact. And this is one that I want to show you is at one of my son's graduation from high school. It was a perfect opportunity to offer a father's blessing. And so there are some components to a father's blessing that I think that this is in a formal sense. Now, we bless them day in and day out as we recognize their strengths and the things that they've done well and their character growth, and we acknowledge those things. And so, but this was this is an image of what I gave my son. We read it publicly at his high school graduation, and so and it starts off describing Rodney and how he transitioned through life and what things we saw in him. But then I gave some very specifics, and this is not something to copy as far as words, okay? Because these words were specific to Rodney. We had been watching him grow for 17 years, and so I pointed out the things as I looked into his future. I saw his future through his present and his past, because I knew him and what he was. And that's why I said, you shall be an influencer. You shall be an innovator. You'll push the limits of this, that, and the other. And you'll go on and then, but what they really want to know is those final 5 words. It says, my final word of blessing is summed up in 5 words. I am proud of you. And you give it to them, not only verbally, but you give it to them in a written form, where it goes into some type of memorabilia, so that they can look at it whenever when they're 50 and you're no longer alive, and they can go, yeah, my dad was proud of me. And that can be a springboard. Even here, it was a springboard for him to launch into his college career and to pursue it with zest and fervor, and to grow and to continue into maturity. And you know what? He has lived out these words, not because I used those words to empower him. He already was those things, but hearing them from someone like you can open a door, or maybe take the fear out of walking through some doors that they should go through in life. And so it just is a springboard for them. And your words are so important, Dad. It is so important for you to stop and think of each child and find an opportunity to bless them, whether it's a high school graduation or whether it's some other event. Some people have a bar mitzvah type of event when they are launching from childhood into adulthood, and that you as the dad are saying, you are now a man, you are now a young woman. You've passed from childhood into adulthood. And so there's a lots of different opportunities, and people have written books about ways of doing this. So you may find a resource out there to help you. But our blessing may not just be words. It is a meaningful touch. A meaningful touch, usually in other people's presence. Now, I'm not talking about a sexual type of touch. I'm talking about just a meaningful touch. A arm around a shoulder. And sometimes a handshake can be meaningful because it says, I'm going to treat you like a fellow man. A delightful look, the way that we look at our children, when you look into their pupils, do you look down deep within them and connect with them? So a delightful look. Time you spend with them. And again, the spoken word, as I alluded. So there are a lot of ways that we can bless our children, but we have to plan it. These kinds of things often don't happen just by accident. Now, we can also lead with our character. And, whether we like it or not, fathers are the standard of what is right. Now, that has a downside to that too. So where you have some struggles, they are going to tend to see that as okay and normal and right. Our character kind of becomes a benchmark for our children. So as we can grow in our character, it will be reflected in our children. So again, you have a lot of influence on your children just by who you are. They're watching you. And there are poems and songs about children watching their dads and wanting to be just like you. I'm your buckaroo, and so you are having an influence on your children. So work on yourself and your character. Where you are have struggles, find someone who will help you to grow. A mentor. Sometimes your mentoring is through books or other resources. But hopefully you can find someone who will invest in your life that will be really a true friend, a leader, a mentor to you, and help you grow. Now, the scripture that we often refer to in the homeschool world is this Deuteronomy 6 passage where it says, "And these words I command you today will be on your heart," first your heart, and then you will teach them to your children diligently, to your sons as you go through life, as you sit in your house, as you walk by the way, as you lie down and rise up. And it's just, as life is going along, there are teachable moments if we will look at those situations through the eyes of our children. So if we'll stop and think, what are they seeing? And we can explain the world to them as we sit in our house and as we walk by the way, and going on a nature walk and just trying to imagine, what are they seeing and what are they not seeing? What should they notice that they're not? And having some times where you're kind of observing what is going on within them. That's a teachable moment as we go along. While you're riding in the car, going to the store to get the last few items that you've forgotten before, that's an opportunity to have a conversation that is easy. And so take advantage of those moments as you they should here sit in your house, walk by the way, drive in the car, go to the store. So are you growing in your competence? Now, competence, as we said before, is not saying, I think I can do this. It's actually being able to do something. And so where you grow in your competence, it's going to also build an environment for your children to want to be competent as well. This job is hard. This job of being a dad, winging it, is not enough. So it's going to take some effort. Being a man of God doesn't make a man a good father. And there are tons of examples in the scripture. I listed some here: Eli, Samuel, David, Solomon, Gideon. And the list goes on of people who were greatly used of God, and they were spiritual men, yet they weren't good fathers. And you can't tell a good father by what they do, say, or think. You look at their children. So in all these cases, we look at the children, and boy, there were some that didn't quite meet the mustard, so to speak. And so and there were scriptural pronouncements of their inadequacy as a father. So we can grow. There are tools, there are books, there are mentors. Find some way to study how to be a more effective father. And so I don't say this to make you feel guilty. We can grow. There's no perfect father. But let's just say we try to make one step forward and be more competent as a father. Now, we also should be competent in our work. If we're not competent, if we're not a good salesman, if that's what you do, if you're not a good auto mechanic, you just kind of wing it, that's going to be a kind of a measure, a standard of measure for your children. They go, Dad, he doesn't care. He's not the best in what he does. He's just an average person. I'm going to be average like my dad. They need to see that you're growing in all aspects, in your work, in your relationships with other people, in your relationships at home, your understanding of the world. Do you keep up with the news? So we can pursue all of this and changing and growing as a father and an influencer, a leader in the home, if we have this idea that we are running this race, and by golly, we're going to win. All right, that doesn't mean that we win against another person. We're not better. We're not comparing ourselves to the next runner, but we are going to finish the race. Lots of times competitive runners, they're not racing against the next guy. They're racing against their clock. They're trying to beat their last time. And in the same way with golf or other sports, lots of times the competitor is racing against themselves or competing against themselves. And in the same way, we should be continually growing, saying, I want to be better at this. So the scripture, like Colossians 3:23 says, whatsoever you do, do it heartily, as unto the Lord. Okay, study to show yourself approved. That 2 Timothy 2:15. We need to take intentional practice. Just like we would with sports, we practice things that we're not good at. Listen, you can tell your children what you're not good at, not because they need to know. They already know. They know whenever we are having trouble controlling our emotions. But it just helps them to know that we know. So, and so there's no secrets. It's not like they're having to act like you've got the maturity thing all wrapped up. You don't have to put on a facade, and they appreciate the honesty. So you can say, listen, I really messed up here, and I'm trying to get a hold of my anger, or I'm trying to get a hold of not overspending money and putting us in a bind here, or whatever it is. Okay, so how did I get on that? I forgot. But nonetheless, we can use coaching both for ourselves and for our children. The Proverbs is largely a coaching kind of book. The Proverbs is really a father talking to his sons or children. and saying, watch out for this. This is a way to understand how you speak to someone. You can use the Proverbs as a coaching tool and read it and talk about it and saying, how would this apply to the situation today or this week? Or so we should have a relentless pursuit of improvement. Galatians 6:9, do not grow weary in well doing, for in due season you shall reap if you do not grow weary. And then there's also incremental goals. I love this passage from 2 Peter chapter 1 where it says, and to your faith add knowledge, and to your knowledge moral excellence, and to your moral excellence. It keeps going on and on. We keep adding bit and bit. It's not like we suddenly arrive at character or competence, but it's a process of saying, okay, I want to be better at this than I was last year. And that's better at encouraging your spouse, nurturing your children, better at living out character before our children, better at time commitments. So whatever it is, you set the goals and incremental goals. It's not like we suddenly become the perfect person. That's not a realistic goal. Let's grow a little bit. So parenting is often a partner sport, and it usually is. And I say unless you're a single parent, you probably have a partner. And so it's very important for us to be aligned in what our values are for our family and what are the things that we really want to accomplish. Some of my dear friends who are also home educators, they had an annual ritual that I loved. I wish I knew about it earlier in my life. They called it having a board retreat, a school board retreat. And so it was he and his wife would go away for an afternoon, or if possible, they'd go away for a weekend where they would kind of plan and get aligned and saying, hey, these are some things that are important for this year. And they would kind of set goals, and they'd work on their communication. And they would plan on things that they would do with the children through the year and saying, okay, we should do this, this, and this because these are our goals for the year. And it just helped them get lined up with what was important currently. And the important things kind of shift through life as our children change and as we change and our situation changes. So staying aligned is important. Working on our communication, and sometimes that means getting the emotion set to the side so that we can really talk about the issues. And if there is emotional tension between you and your spouse, you may need a mediator to kind of help you go, okay, now hold on a second. This is what I heard you say. And is that what you meant? And is that what you understood? And, somebody that can kind of help you to navigate and break the ice, so to speak. Hopefully there's not a lot of ice in your relationship. But if there is, get help. Getting your communication lined up and taking some of the emotion out of it, and focus on trying to affirm the strengths in one another rather than identify the weaknesses. And really, I say each person plays a key part. Understanding that there are some things that are primarily your responsibility and some things that are primarily your spouse's responsibility, and you agreeing on those things and knowing that certain situations cause you to shift. That maybe that you were forced to work out of town for a period of time, or your work demands or something shifted and made you have to say, okay, I know this is one of my main responsibilities, but I need you to help me out here during this time. And it goes both ways. You've got to be willing to give as well as to take. So maximizing unique strengths. There's some things that you do well, you should do those. Some things that she does well, she should do those. And so identifying what the strengths are and trying to maximize those. And by golly, you need to celebrate when something goes well. So share the wins. When one does well, that all celebrate. Now, this is one thing that's really an idea for the school board retreat or planning time that what you have. You say, what are we aiming at with our children? What do we want them to be like when this is all said and done? And describing what it is we're wanting to produce in our children. It says, he who aims at nothing hits it every time. So let's aim at something. And so we see the long-range view through the binoculars or the telescope, and we say, okay, down the road, here's where we're headed. This is what we want it to look like at the end. And so from that, we set short-term goals and saying, okay, this year we're going to work on kindness, because we see that there's a real area of growth, need for growth and kindness. And let's plan things that we can be more kind to one another. Or you come up with what the goal is, but you can plan what it is. So consistency, we've talked about this. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. It's what we do day in and day out. What do you do as a habit? It's something that you do from delivery to diploma and beyond. From delivery to diploma. And so hopefully, well, there are things that are important to you, and you've been doing those. But just evaluate it. Do we need some adjustment? And what is it that we do daily? One thing that we committed to is that we wanted our children to know Scripture and to value Scripture like we did. And so we planned a time that we started our day with a Scripture reading time and a devotion time of sorts. And it looked vastly different in different stages of our children's development. Sometimes it looked like reading a comic book that was Scripture based. Sometimes it looked like, us singing songs and talking about the words. It was not anything that was set, and it was not. Sometimes it didn't look real dignified, but it was rooted in the fact that it had Scripture, and we were intent on that. That was something that was important to us, so we tried to do that daily. We didn't feel bad about it if we couldn't do it that day. Maybe we could only do it 3 days this week, but by golly, we tried to do it every day, and it was a habit, and it was something that marked our family. So also we valued reading aloud. We did that as a routine, as a habit. So consistency. But whenever something is the same most of the time and it's dependable, it helps to build trust between you and your children. So being a father is a long haul venture. And I'll put some words here. Is an identity. Do you identify yourself as a father? Do you have habits that really make you a better father? What's your start of the day routine, end of the day routine? Those are all habits. Do you have habits of praising your children? We have to train ourselves to do those things over and over and over to where they become something that happens without effort. That's a habit. Do you build structures for yourself that help that to happen? Now, traditions is something that I encourage people to think about, particularly if your children are small. Tradition can be planned and say, when I was growing up, this is the way our family had Easter. But, now that I'm mature and grown, I don't think that really was a good representation. Well, let's do something different. Let's plan a new tradition. And so what your children grow up with, they consider that to be normal. So you can change your past experience for whatever it is, how you handle holidays or how you handle work days. My wife said that they had work days as a family, and it always ended with going to get ice cream. That was the celebration for a work day well done. So there can be traditions like that. So it doesn't have to be something, I use the word dignified or big. It may be that our tradition after, well, I can't think of a good one right now. I didn't prepare that, but traditions are very important. And having words to live by. We had some mantras that we live by, and they kind of happened as we were going along. We would say, why do we do things like we do? And so we'd come up with words for that. And one of mine was, you don't find opportunity, you create it. And we must have said it a million times in our family, because we were always looking for ways to create an opportunity for growth or an opportunity for recognition. You know, we wanted our children to be self-motivated, and so we looked for ways for them to have things happen. And one in particular was that my daughter was going to be in a situation where Miss America was the speaker to this event. And I said, would you like to meet Miss America? And of course, her eyes popped out of her head. Of course. So we came up with a plan to create the opportunity to have personal interaction with her. And so actually it worked out. But that was a mantra for us. You have words to live by for you. Yours might not be opportunities are not found, they are created. Yours are something else. And we had several. That's just one of ours. But nonetheless, remember, you got to lead with care, character, competence, and consistency. And so the lead with the 4 C's: seek first to understand and to be understood, then to be understood, I mean. That means that you're going to do as much listening as you're going to be talking. Remember, you've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. That should tell you something. All right? Compliment your spouse publicly. Focus on her strengths, not her weaknesses. She knows her weaknesses, and she's very well aware of what they are, and they loom large in her thoughts. You need to remind her of her strengths. Praise her publicly. And that's what the proverb says, and her children will praise her in the streets. And not to say that you're her child, but you are the one who has the most powerful words. Bless your children. Find an opportunity, whether it's a formal event or whether it's just the way that you look at them. You can bless them. So dads, you are a thermostat. But I want to challenge you to be more effective in setting the temperature in your home and working together with your spouse in that regard. You can do this thing. You have been called for such a time as this. So again, I'm Dr. Roger Smith. I have a video blog. It's a weekly parenting tip called Parenting Matters Now. It's on Facebook at Parenting Matters Now, and that's where you can find me. So let's man up, dads.